Hi, my name is Andrew, and as many of you know, I am the webmaster slash curator slash owner of TwilightZoneMuseum.com and our associated Facebook page. And this video is to commemorate and just make a few comments on the fact that Twilight Zone is turning 60 years old this week. And, you know, what a milestone. 60 is, one of those really guidepost type anniversaries. There's the 50th. My God, if you get another decade past 50, you're doing well. So of course, there's no doubt that Twilight Zone is one day going to have outlived many senior citizens as it ages from 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, and it will go on. It will never stop being watched. But more importantly, well, not more importantly, much less importantly, but more importantly in the context of this video, I did want to thank all of you guys who have helped keep Twilight Zone Museum online for the last 17 years. And it's hard to believe it's been that many years since this website came online in 2002, just a couple of weeks after the world's first ever Twilight Zone convention, Stars of the Zone convention, happened in August of 2002, August 24th and 25th. It so happened this year that August 24th and 25th of 2019 fell on a Saturday and a Sunday, just like it did in 2002. And I was looking at the calendar and I realized, wow, it has been 17 years. That's a lot of years. And I was thinking back just to a couple of, I don't think about the conventions too much. If for no other reason than they were so many years ago now. But I was thinking back to them, and I thought about several really key memories, things that really popped into my mind that I haven't forgotten and never will forget. And the first one, obviously, was that it was held at Beverly Garland's Holiday Inn, and it's not Holiday Inn anymore. But the fact that we held it there was special in itself, because Beverly herself was in Twilight Zone, and it was actually Anne Francis who recommended that we do the event there, and one thing led to another, and that happened. But Beverly, I mean, my gosh, she was not only an actress, she was a tremendous businesswoman, and working with her staff, not her so much, but with her staff, who were all so dedicated and so professional and so gracious, over the fact that we were doing this, large-scale event at her hotel was really very special. And I remember the next day, Sunday morning, after we had the VIP dinner on Saturday night, she said, Andrew, last night was just incredible. I mean, it's like one of the more monumental things that has happened here at my hotel, and that really was very touching. So I did want to just make a couple comments. I could talk all day about the conventions, but I did want to mention two people, Arlene Martell and Jonathan Harris, who were in 22 together. And Arlene first, since she really became an integral figure in my own life. She came in on Saturday morning, and about 2 hours into it, she found me again. She said, Andrew, my God, I've only been here 2 hours, and already this has been like the most moving experience of my life, And she said, this man came up to me and presented me with these two letters that I'd written to James Dean in the 50s. This is the early 50s, and her mascara was kind of running down her face a little bit. And she said, I don't know where he found them, but he came and gave them to me. And she said, it would never have happened without this. And then later on the actor panel, she and Jonathan Harris were sitting next to each other, and Jonathan and Arlene said, Jonathan, I didn't think you remembered me. And he said, yeah, there's room for one more, honey. The famous lines. And, if Don Knotts, who never appeared on Twilight Zone, if Don Knotts had like that $1 million, bug-eyed expression, it was Mr. Furley and Barney Fife, and the frazzled, if that was like his calling card, Jonathan's voice was certainly his own calling card, because he had one of those kind of old world $1 million voices that was especially used to great effect later in his life when he did a lot of voiceover work, in A Bug's Life and, however many other movies that he lent himself to. But to have them both, there on the panel together was fantastic. But, I get sad when I think about the fact that Jonathan was less than 3 months away from the graveyard. He was at the end of his life, mentally still in good shape, but he was one of the first to respond when I sent out a mass mailing, U.S. mailing, of invitations to Twilight Zone actors. And, within about 3 days or, a week at the most, they started coming back in, and he was one of the very first. And he said, yes, I will be there, but I don't have any photos. This is going to be like an autograph type convention. And he said, if you could find some for me, that would be great. And of course we did. And, he sat at his table signing autographs, and he was telling people about 22 and about Barbara Nichols and how she died so young and what a tremendous loss that was. She was such a funny lady. And then, of course, with The Silence, talking about Franchot Tone and what an incredible actor he was. But, the publicity had gotten out, he'd fallen onto one side of his face when in fact he'd been beaten up. But Jonathan said, what a tremendous actor, but you could smell the bourbon on him in the morning. He was just such an alcoholic. So, we thought that was funny. And as I say, Anne Francis was really the one who suggested that we do it there, and she came down from Santa Barbara, and my God, what a lovely person she was. And that was sadly the only time I ever saw her. She lived another maybe 8 or 9 years after that, but I never saw her again. She unfortunately met kind of with ill health in her later years. She couldn't come to our sequel convention that we did in 2004. She was going to, but she got sick, and it always happens to the nicest people. But I remember on Friday night when we were setting up everything, or late Friday afternoon, I was at the opposite end of the ballroom, and she came in. She drove down from Santa Barbara, and she checked me into the hotel. She was standing in the doorway, which is bathed in sunlight. And, here she was. Her figure was the same. I knew it was her. Her figure hadn't changed in 40 plus years. And she just, she was over 70 years old, but she just looked fantastic. So, having her there was, definitely one of the highlights. And then, of course, her reuniting with James Best, and they hadn't seen each other hardly at all since they did their episode together. A scant few times, I think she mentioned, over the years they'd seen each other, but it had been a long time. And then to have them reunite and be on the panel, of course, panel of actors talking together, that was just tremendous. Having all of those people under one roof or on the same property for one weekend, we knew it had never happened before, and it was never going to happen again. So every moment of that weekend was just savored, and everybody had a good time. It wasn't like a convention. It was like a gathering, a gathering of people. We were there to pay tribute to Rod in the series, and the convention aspect was largely absent, thankfully. So that's something I'll always really be thankful for. So I brought Twilight Zone Museum online in 2002 really to cover the conventions and TZ doings and happenings, and somebody told me about 20 years ago when I was first getting involved with all these different things, they said, Andrew, you're never going to cut the apron strings between yourself and Twilight Zone. It's never going to happen for you. And I didn't believe it. I thought it was actually kind of sarcastic that they made that comment. But it's turned out to be true. And I have no regrets. I'm not complaining in the least. Because although, I don't do Twilight Zone for a living, having it as part of my life, I couldn't ask for anything more. Yes, I do have a day job. I'm a salaried employee at a large publicly traded company as an accountant, and that's what I do for a living. I wish I could do Twilight Zone full-time. That would be nice. But there aren't very many of us out there who are in that category. Nobody, I don't think. Um, but anyhow, um, really these things would not, the website and the Facebook page would not be around if it was not for you guys. And as long as there's financial support and also interest, they will remain online indefinitely. And forgive me for looking down at my notes, but I want to hit on everything that I'm wanting to hit on everything that I intended to. And finally, I should mention the Terry Burnham Memorial Project, which started and concluded actually a long time ago now. It's been now 3 years since we placed her headstone in Forest Lawn, and then her remains only got officially buried there a year ago. But that was an unexpected sort of thing that, again, it was born out of Twilight Zone Museum and the Facebook page, especially the Facebook page, because you guys made it all happen. And I got an email a couple of weeks ago from a man who was a resident of Long Beach, still is. And I'm not sure if he knew Terry during their formative years or not. But he said, I've been once before to visit Terry, and I brought her flowers this year. I brought her flowers on her birthday. So I went to Forest Lawn on her birthday to leave the flowers, and I went into the mortuary office because I couldn't remember where the headstone was exactly. And I said the name Burnham to the receptionist. She said, "Oh, Terry?" And he said, "Yeah, of course." And she said, "Yeah, a lot of people come and to visit her." And when I read that, I was really overcome by that, because not so much what I did, but all of you all 65 or so of you who donated amounts large and small that added up to more than $3,500, which was needed to make that happen, and it did happen. And it just shows how effective things, something like that can be, and why it's worth doing. So it's stuff like that that makes me really proud to be behind these things, and so on and so forth. And again, it's not for me, it's for you. It's for those who revere and love and appreciate the Twilight Zone. And to conclude this video, here's to the next 60. Most of us will probably not be around in another 60 years, or if we are, it'll be a miracle. But, the Twilight Zone is an important TV show. Of course, it's great stories that are well told, as one journalist said, but it has its own place in our popular culture, and there's nothing else that has matched it, which is the sign of great art, or one of them. So, to conclude this video, though, I did want to give a nod to two very special ladies very quickly before this gets too long. Gloria Paul and Camille Franklin. And Gloria, who appeared in a 2-line part in And When the Sky Was Opened in the first season, was at the convention that weekend, and even prior to it, she did so much to help me, and she was to the point of being kind of pushy in a way. She called up the LA Times and got price quotes, for advertising, and of course I didn't have any budget in those days to advertise the thing in the LA Times. Nonetheless, it was well enough attended. But she went over to Earl Holliman's house and tried to get him to come, and he said he was busy that weekend. And she also called up Edson Stroll, and he said he was busy that weekend. But Edson came to the second event in 2004. And everybody loved meeting him. The elusive Edson Stroll, who was so dashingly good-looking back in 1960 when he appeared on Eye of the Beholder with Donna Douglas. And finally, he appeared. He made a public appearance. Actually, Edson did a lot of public appearances, but not in the realm of conventions or Twilight Zone. He was, a singer and a vocal guy who was an expert in the art of, voiceover and diction and all that stuff. But anyhow, and Camille Franklin and Gloria had been friends for 45 years, and Gloria got her to come as well. I didn't really talk to Camille that weekend of the convention, but I got to know her tremendously over the next 5 years after I moved to Los Angeles, and I kept in touch with her up until the time that she died, although I hadn't seen her in a long time. But she was the biggest fan of Twilight Zone, as was Gloria. She was the biggest fan of it, and I got to know Camille at our table at the Book Publicists Club, the Southern California Book Publicists Club, meetings that were held every 2 months, still are, at the Sportsman's Lodge. And Gloria had her table. Gloria was the membership chairman, and those meetings were always very well attended, and there were so many people who, big names, at least at one time big names, who came and spoke at those meetings. There was Dick Van Patten and Fred Travelina and Wink Martindale and Jane Keane and Peter Mark Richmond came at one time, and George Clayton Johnson. So many of these people, they were lucky enough to get. Even Susan Stafford, who was the Vanna White before there was a Vanna White on Wheel of Fortune. So those meetings were fantastic, and that's really where I got to know Camille, who turned out she was as big a fan of Twilight Zone as anyone. And one of my last communications with her was in 2017-ish. I mailed her a copy of the the LA Times article with Terry Burnham, which she might have seen beforehand, but she wrote me a letter back thanking me for it, and said, Andrew, what a stunning piece of publicity, and I'm glad you were able to do that. So anyhow, this concludes my video, but again, I thank all of you who have helped keep the torch lit. And if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't have this. So, hold yourselves in very high regard, and even if you don't contribute financially, I'm not asking for your financial support, but if you are so inclined, donations are welcome, and know that it's for you, for the people, and as I say, as long as there is interest, it will remain online. Okay, so thank you very much.